Terry Rozier continues to frustrate Heat fans. Can he come off the bench for a smaller role? And was acquiring him the worst trade in franchise history? We'll debate that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Have a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to take a look back on the Terry Rozier trade and look ahead to what the Heat can do this summer. But first, David, I opened up yesterday's show about how impressed I was with Bam after that game against the Cavaliers. And maybe I'm just guilty of being too positive. Maybe I'm guilty of having low expectations for this team. But you go on the internet, nobody's talking about Bam. Everybody's talking about Terry Rozier and how bad he was and how bad he has been. And David, you rightfully and made a great point on yesterday's show to bring up just how bad Terry Rozier was in that game, especially in the fourth quarter, in the second half. Missed all 8 of his shots, 3 turnovers in the second half. The highlights don't play well. And that seems to be the conversation today. And so nobody wants to focus on the positive. I get it, a loss. Everybody's going to focus on the negative. Maybe LeBron was right. Maybe that's just the way NBA discourse has gone. But no matter how you slice it, Terry Rozier is making it increasingly difficult to ignore just how bad he's been. And we're at the point where this nightmare season for him has reached rock bottom. And I have to agree with the point you made yesterday, David. It's not just that he has to go to the bench. It's not just that you have to reduce the minutes. There is no place for him in the rotation with the way that he's been playing.
A day later, after cooler heads have prevailed, a night of sleep maybe, and not much sleep, but enough. I still feel guilty about it. I don't disagree with anything I said, though. Like rewatching it even and seeing the the comments from people on social media reacting to it, they're in 100% agreement. And he struggled so mightily, and he just does everything so poorly. The threat of a Terry Rozier was somebody who was going to be able to get to the rim, finish around the rim, and provide some outside shooting. He was averaging 20-something points per game with the Charlotte Hornets. And I know that's a team that was missing LaMelo Ball. They were obviously not competing for anything. A lot of quote-unquote looter in a riot kind of points per game numbers, whatever. That doesn't change the fact that he was a top scorer for a team in the NBA. Since coming to Miami, he has been far from that. And that performance against the Cleveland Cavaliers might have just been the most abysmal of a string of really bad performances. I feel bad for Eric Reed, who keeps saying, oh, it's been a bad year for Terry Rozier, and, kind of hoping that he's going to turn it around.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's just been a bad month for Terry Rozier. It's like, no, dude, it's been a little bit longer than a bad month. Like, he has not been able to function at an NBA level for quite some time now. And I questioned this yesterday. I can't recall the last time he was even good. I'm sure there's a game I'm probably forgetting, but like not even like maybe even just a little bit average. Like most of his performances have been flat out bad. And last night against Cleveland, it was the worst of them all, perhaps. Just the costly turnovers, the bad shot selection, multiple air balls. He has to be hurt, stressed. Again, I look, we went through this, unfortunately, with Jimmy last year, where we could be critical of the player on the court, not knowing what he may be dealing with off the court. I've said this yesterday, and I will repeat it today. I don't like criticizing players because they are human first and foremost. And at the same time, you have to wonder whether or not something might be impacting him off the court, because he just looks like a completely different player. He does not look like somebody who's capable of scoring anywhere near consistently at the NBA level. And so it's been a tough watch for Terry. It's been a tough struggle for him. And you wonder whether or not there has to be something going on there. But Yeah, I don't know if he can play anymore. Like he's effectively costing this team that can't afford to have those kind of players on there. Like they need to be almost perfect for them to get victories against good quality teams. We've seen them beat bad teams, but in order for them to beat good teams, they have to be near perfect, because even when they're playing much better than that, or maybe when he's not getting significant minutes, we've seen them blow leads, etc. They can't afford to play Terry Rozier if he's going to be costing him games the way he did against Cleveland.
No, not when you are in a battle in the standings, not for the 6th seed, but to avoid falling lower in the standings and end up in the 9-10 matchup, or even right now it's 7-8 in Orlando. That game, the 7th seed in the play-in tournament is important because you have 2 chances on your home court to win 1 game, as opposed to having to go on the road. And so, they cannot afford for Terry Rozier to be playing anymore. I understood the logic of eventually it's got to come around. But Eric Spoelstra waited too long, frankly. I don't understand what the point was in playing him 40 minutes the other night. He seems to be obsessed with his ball handling, just the fact that he could dribble up the court. And I understand that the Heat are short on guys like that. But Davion Mitchell is here now. And he played 15 fewer minutes than Terry Rozier did in that game. And I thought Davion Mitchell was one of Miami's most important players in that matchup going into that game, because he can guard Donovan Mitchell. He can guard Darius Garland. Rozier ain't doing that. Rozier's handing the ball over to those guys. And so I have no idea. And we can get into the stats and all this stuff. I brought up the fact that ESPN, they have this new net rating metric, catch-all metric, that ranked Terry Rozier as the 12th worst player in the league. That was before last night's game. This morning, 6th worst player in the league.
Oh.
And the only other guys in and around that list near Terry Rozier, they play for the Wizards, the Jazz, the Raptors, the Nets, the Hornets. Terry Rozier is playing like a player who is tanking his team. And he quite literally is tanking his team this year. And I'm with you, David. I like Terry Rozier personally. I've had nothing but good interactions with him in the locker room. I don't claim to know him well, but he seems like a friendly guy. He seems well liked in the locker room. I don't like to criticize players over the top. But at some point, we have to hold everybody accountable. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a column today about he can't play again. The fact that you did this with Duncan Robinson once. And then what happened to Duncan Robinson? He turned it around the next year. And now he's a fan favorite. And I do think that that's the more likely scenario. It's more likely that Terry Rozier has a bounce back year next year than this is just who he is. I mean, his drop-off is insane. He went from averaging 23 points per game on 46% shooting to 12 points per game and missing 60% of his shots. This drop-off from one year to the next is insane and has nothing to do with context. David, what happened with the neck injury? That's what I want answers to, because you have a before neck injury, Terry Rozier, and you have an after neck injury. And I'll never forget, Eric Spoelstra telling us he woke up weird with a kink in his neck. It happens to everybody. Said that.
Right.
And then we never saw Terry Rozier again that season. And then Pat Riley tells us in his end of season press conference, oh, he just got out of his neck brace. And I'm like, everybody in the room was like, what neck brace?
Neck brace, yeah.
I remember. What happened? What happened with that neck injury? Because neck injuries can end careers, David. We've seen it. Neck injuries end playing careers. So the fact that he is
Markieff Norris.
Yes. What happened? I want answers. What happened? It's the only thing I could think of. I don't believe that I know that there's this FBI investigation into his role in the sports gambling and stuff. That's old news. It's old, man. Like, I don't believe that he's doing that. I don't believe it. But there's
such a comfortable narrative
job by the Heat. I don't believe that either.
I know.
To me, it's more likely that something's really, to your point, there's stuff that we don't always know that's happening in these people's lives, and I just wonder, it's a shame that the Heat organization never provided more information on this neck injury, but I'm wondering what the reason is, and I'm wondering if it has anything to do with his struggles on the court now. But if they did know something, then why are you playing him for 40 minutes against the Cavaliers? I can't. I'm every time I get somewhere, I'm back to, why are you playing this guy 40 minutes?
Yeah, it's Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and the board with the red string everywhere. It's like massive conspiracy theories, and it always circles.
I'm going to start drinking like Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like, that's where I'm at. This sucks.
Yeah, it does. But even if there is something, and again, you never want to speculate or dive too deeply into this, but like if there is something off the court, we've seen players take leaves of absence, or missing game, personal
Personal
reasons.
reasons. All people are out for personal reasons all the time.
So it's not like he's requesting time off to deal with something or to reset. And we were both how wrong we were. We thought, man, the All-Star break, nobody needs it more than Terry, because that's really going to help him reset, and we're going to see a return to some kind of function for him. Oh, it's like the time off was like for him to like get worse somehow. I don't know. It's a really bad time for him and his effort. And you don't question whether or not he's trying his best. I don't know, but even again, some of the shots that he was taking yesterday, the step backs, airball, like to airball multiple shots,
airballing shots, giving the ball away.
Oh,
I mean, you look at the highlights on social media, it looks like one of those deep fake videos.
Yeah.
Where like that can't be real.
Right.
And then you're like, no, I watched this. This is real. This happened. This happened in real life. The ball just slipping out of his hands at half court, no pressure. This is the guy who and more than anything, I can't. Why is Eric Spoelstra playing him? And how did nobody ask him about this in the post game? I just don't understand. It was, again, I guess you could blame me too for not asking post game in previous games, but like this is again rock bottom of a nightmare season. If there was ever a time to ask, it would have been after that Cavs game. So this is a mystery. I can't figure it out, and this is why you and I agree. We hate being critical, but at some point we have a role as media to hold these people accountable. And whatever Terry Rozier is going through is one thing. The decision to continuing to play him while he's going through whatever this is another thing. And that I have no sympathy for whatsoever. I have no sympathy for that whatsoever. So whatever. Let's take a break here. Is Terry Rozier, is that trade the worst in Heat history? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. You can build different lineups. This week, you can select like Luka Doncic for more than 25 points, and maybe go for Jason Tatum for more than 8 rebounds. You can mix and match so many different things. Prize Picks makes it simple. You can set your lineup up in less than 60 seconds, and you can stay engaged all game long. And when you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. Thanks to Josh Lloyd. He had great advice. I picked up Brandon Clark with the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury, and that's already helping me this week. Some big games.
There you go.
Back to Terry Rozier, unfortunately, though. Is the Terry Rozier trade the worst in Heat history? They gave up the final 3 months of Kyle Lowry's expiring contract, a top 14 protected pick in 2027, and that pick could become unprotected potentially in 2028. And that is going to look really bad if this is who Terry Rozier ends up being. We were all, look, everybody, you and I got on here in last January when they made the trade, said that's the right move. Get off of Lowry's contract. Not only was he not helping the team, and I think people forget just how bad he was, but he was also sort of an albatross in terms of a distraction. It just felt like he has worn out his welcome in Miami. He didn't want to really be here anymore. He didn't want to move to the bench, all these things.
Right.
But we've seen teams just deal with stuff for 3 months too. And with Andy Ellisberg coming out this summer and saying, oh, we weren't players in free agency, but if you really think about it, Terry Rozier was our big free agent acquisition. You could also argue that this is the worst free agent signing in Heat history. Like none of this is good. And I do. Like, what would have happened had you just let Lowry's salary expire, kept your pick? Would you have been in play for some more trades? You would have had this other pick that you could potentially do. Like, the what ifs are endless, I suppose, but
Yeah.
it really underscores the whole fact that this is probably the worst trade in history. I have other candidates that we could talk through, but I don't know that any of them hold a candle to this one.
No, and I know there's not just recency bias here too. It's just, again, you laid it out pretty clearly there. Like you have handcuffed your future to Terry Rozier, and the not just a first round pick, but also the fact that you're paying him the amount of money that you will be. Had you just let Kyle Lowry walk, and I get the understanding. The understanding was he was going to come in, fill a role. Last year was going to be one more all-in effort.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that fans don't understand, is that everybody's saying, oh, we want a championship. We have to get a championship. The amount of pressure on this organization to win a championship during the Jimmy Butler era, well, that's kind of what preceded that, led to that move. Was, we know Kyle's your friend, but Kyle's not doing anything out there. He is not giving us either the defense or the shot making or the ability to get to the rim. We need something more, and we're paying him $30 million a year, and he's just not good enough. And so that kind of leads to the idea, well, Terry Rozier is available. He's going to help. And with his addition, we've got a good blend of Jaime Jaquez Jr., this rookie, Niko Jovic, this second-year player who's finding a way to thrive. We have all these different pieces in place here. We can make it happen. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out.
The other name that was brought up during that time was DeJounte Murray. And the Heat were in talks with Atlanta. They had conversations about DeJounte Murray, and I guess the Hawks ultimately did not end up trading DeJounte Murray in the season. They waited until this summer to do it, in part because they were just asking for too much. I know the Lakers were also asking about DeJounte Murray, and they decided not to do it because I guess the Hawks were asking. So maybe that wasn't ever a viable option. I don't know that DeJounte Murray would have been better than Terry Rozier. I don't know that he changes things dramatically for Miami last season or this season. But
right.
I mean, you also think about the other names that Miami had been involved with at that spot: Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, and they end up with Terry Rozier. No wonder Jimmy Butler left, man. And I know ultimately it's just because of the contract and all that stuff, but like that trade, considering all the context and who Miami wanted and who they ended up with, is really not going to age well. And it really kind of hurt watching Donovan Mitchell ball out against Miami with this Cavaliers team, this player that everybody had so desperately wanted, and we're sitting there with Terry Rozier fumbling the ball away. I mean, that's a tough picture, I think, for Heat fans, and I can understand.
Even Lillard. I mean, like, to go within the span of a few months from we're this close to acquiring Damian Lillard, and now he's an All-NBA player. Perhaps he's putting up great numbers. Like, he looks revitalized in Milwaukee, and you're getting the exact opposite of that in Rozier. So it's been the type of contrast. Again, it's not just a recency bias here. There's so much that a franchise could potentially lose. There's also the context of not being one of those superstar players. Maybe he's feeling that pressure. He's always struck me as somebody that's kind of ignorant of the pressure. Like, it just doesn't really bother him. It doesn't faze him because that's kind of how he's always thrived. Like, when he was at his very best in Boston, he's like, I don't care.
He's a gunner, scary Terry, right? Like, it was, and that's what the Heat wanted, right? They had, like, Kyle Lowry was almost too measured, too careful. They needed somebody that was just like, hey, go out. We need somebody to put up some shots, and he's putting the shots up, I suppose, but they're not going in. Other bad trades in Heat history, if we're looking for rivals for some of the worst trades in franchise history. 1994, I did the homework. I went back in a time machine here. 1994, the Heat traded Steve Smith for Kevin Willis. Steve Smith, Heat draft pick, top 5 pick, goes on, becomes an all-star in Atlanta. Great career. Kevin Willis, I think he just lasted one more year. They ended up trading him for Tim Hardaway in the Hardaway deal. But that was not a good trade, considering what Steve Smith ended up being. 2008, the Heat traded Shaq to Phoenix for Sean Marion. Sean Marion was awesome for Phoenix, and I remember loving that trade at the time because I thought it was exactly the sort of, we're gonna play fast around Dwayne Wade, who's really coming into his own. Obviously, he was having MVP caliber seasons that year, and it was gonna be a shift, and Shaq just wasn't what he had been during the 2005 and 2006 runs. But then Sean Marion had like the worst seasons of his career in Miami, and then he went on to go win a championship in Dallas later. So he was better after that, but that wasn't good for Miami. They turned around 2009, another trade here. They trade Sean Marion to Toronto for Jermaine O'Neal. And the interesting thing about that, David, I'm sure you remember, they were actually trying to get Amari Stoudemire at the trade deadline. But Phoenix decided that they didn't want anything that Miami had or anything that Toronto had or whatever. And ultimately, though, getting O'Neal, he was the perfect salary to come off the books in 2010 so that Miami ultimately was able to go get Chris Bosh and obviously LeBron. But that Jermaine O'Neal was awful for Miami. Two more. 2021, they trade Kelly Olynyk to Houston for Victor Oladipo. I've talked about that a lot, about that being sort of the beginning of the end a little bit in terms of the mistakes that Miami made during the Jimmy Butler era. And then in 2022, they traded Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa to Kyle Lowry, which I don't think that was necessarily a horrible trade. Dragic didn't go on to do much of anything. Lowry at least gave you another good 2 years after that. So I don't know if that necessarily qualifies here. But
what about the Danny Granger deal? Just thinking about that one.
What was that one again?
You remember that? That was 2014, the offseason before free agency. And I think the idea was kind of to try to placate LeBron James.
Didn't they
Can't
sign
recall
him?
it. No, I think he was traded. I think it was a trade. And I can't recall exactly what the particulars were of the deal, but you wound up sending out picks again, like it was, like they didn't count for anything, and you wound up sending picks and stuff like that. Maybe Dexter Pittman or like some other kind of similar salary to that, just kind of sending out something. But Granger was not a good player at that point in time. Too many injuries and so far removed from being an all-star with Indiana.
I'm trying to look it up what they traded for him.
I don't know, man. Those are some horrific trades there. Like
I kind of blocked out 2014 to like 2019. Yeah, no. I just sort of blocked it out.
Josh McRoberts, was that a free agency signing? It was.
That was a signing. That was a free agency signing. We were going to have the twin towers of Chris Bosh and Josh McRoberts, and that didn't necessarily work out either.
I will defend that deal forever because I thought McBob was so good as a Bobcat.
He did throw like 2 good passes as a Bobcat against Miami, and they were like, this guy's
the guy.
2 good behind the back passes. They're like, we got to get this guy.
Say what you will about the Kentucky connection. I mean, the Duke Mafia, whatever they were selling there, like thinking that McRoberts was like, I still, injuries and, off the court stuff, but it's too bad. He didn't work out.
All right, we're finally done talking about Terry Rozier, at least for today. There's another Olympic connection, though, besides Bam, that Kevin Durant could explore this summer. We'll tell you which team the Heat need to worry about this summer after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get it on the FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. It's so easy to use FanDuel. Their live betting feature makes everything great because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, you never feel like you miss a chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We were asked on yesterday's postgame show if the Heat were 1 scoring piece away from contention, and the name that keeps coming up is Kevin Durant. And it keeps coming up in part, David, because I keep bringing it up. Because this is the guy. Everything we're talking about, it all is fixed I think, if you get Kevin Durant. I really believe that if you get Kevin Durant, the Heat are maybe not the favorites in the East, but they're right up there with all these other teams. I really believe that. And even if you're not, you owe it to yourself to find out, right? So I think the connection between Miami and Kevin Durant is obvious. Miami's tried to get him 4 or 5 different times. You could almost look at him as Pat Riley's ultimate white whale, right? We know the Hamptons in 2016 couldn't get him then. He signs with Golden State. He's a free agent in 2019. Miami can't sign him. He signs with Brooklyn. When he's traded from Brooklyn to Phoenix, the other team on his list of preferred destinations, Miami. He ends up going to Phoenix. They kick the tires again in February before the trade deadline, and the Suns are asking for too much from everybody, and so that never happens. But they're going to have another chance again this summer. Everybody is saying that that the Suns are going to trade Kevin Durant, and that the Suns are going to work with Kevin Durant to trade him to a preferred destination. And I would bet that the Suns would be very happy to trade him out of the conference if they could help it. But there are teams in the Western Conference lingering and that could be motivated to trade for Kevin Durant. Here's Brian Windhorst talking about this on ESPN this morning.
Where is KD going to wind up?
Another small market team to watch. Minnesota Timberwolves, which Ant Edwards and KD, very tight connection, also from the Olympics. The Timberwolves tried to pull off a crazy trade at the deadline for KD. Look for them to revisit those talks this summer.
Okay, I like that.
So there is an Olympic connection between Kevin Durant and Anthony Edwards, right? Anthony Edwards was on that team too. And all the lines that we're putting between Kevin Durant and Bam Adebayo, I mean, those exist, I suppose, also with Ant. Anthony Edwards has made it very clear that Kevin Durant is his favorite player, admires him. I don't know if that's something that would be intriguing to Kevin Durant, but if Durant's looking to win a championship somewhere else and, in use his words, end his career on his terms, doing so in Minnesota could make some sense there.
Minnesota. What are you giving up to acquire KD? Like, I mean, the comparison, I don't even know what they would have to eventually send to Phoenix, but with KD and Ant and, say, I guess Rudy, we'd probably have to give up Julius Randle, right? I mean,
it would be Randle. It would be a Randle-based pack. The other thing is, both of these teams are in the second apron. And I think Randall's probably going to opt into that contract. He's not going to get $33 million somewhere else. So, unless he's looking for long-term security somewhere else. But there's nobody has cap space. So I think he'd probably opt in and then try to get traded and then figure it out later. But it's hard to build a package.
Yeah, I can't imagine him choosing Minnesota. You know, they just went through an ownership change. Like, I mean, we've laid out the argument before. Like, he is probably at a point right now where he just wants things to be so much easier, and just to join an organization that's almost become synonymous with stability and consistency, much to their detriment on occasions. But that's who they've always been. Pat Riley is the linchpin. He keeps that franchise together. He's the face of the franchise, but everyone else that's been with the organization almost since when Pat joined, like, they're still there. That's what makes this such a unique situation, is that you have people who have been with this team for 2 decades plus, and that's what keeps this thing going, is that there's this sense of family, there's this sense of consistency and stability that that you can't find anywhere else around the NBA, or very rarely, like maybe San Antonio. Other than that, I just can't imagine KD choosing his friendship with Ant Edwards to be that.
But he's
great.
done this every single time. He
Kyrie?
had stability and winning in Golden State, and then he left. I likened the whole Kevin Durant situation before to, you know, you break up with a girl and you usually look for the opposite. There's also some guys who break up with a girl and then find the exact same girl.
Yeah.
And maybe Durant's one of those guys. Yeah. Because he leaves a great situation in Golden State where he's winning championships to play with who? His friend, Kyrie Irving, in Brooklyn. And then he goes to Phoenix in part because I think he was attracted to playing with Devin Booker. And I also think there's a part of KD who's looking to be maybe the hero somewhere. You know, he mentioned how he never would have signed with Golden State had they lost or had they won the finals the year prior. But because they lost the finals, he was able to come in and kind of be the savior. He's talked about that openly. I think he looked at the idea of turning Brooklyn and that whole franchise around and being the #1 franchise in New York, which obviously never happened. But I think he was attracted to the romantic idea of that.
Yeah.
Bringing Phoenix their first ever championship. I think that's something he's talked about that.
But that's Ant's team. Like, I mean, I know he joined Devin Booker's team, but I don't know that anybody views Miami as either Bam's team or Tyler's team to the same degree. Like, I know
I
that
don't
there
think
would be
Durant cares about that. You think he cares about that? I mean,
you're talking about.
To my point, I don't know what he cares about. I'm done trying to guess Durant's next move. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. To me, I'm with you. Miami makes the most sense in the world, but Kevin Durant hasn't always done the thing that makes the most sense in the world, and that's why I'm legitimately worried about Minnesota.
Okay.
Maybe he's really into Prince.
Completely unrelated question. How soon before white whale is totally erased from the American lexicon?
Is this something to do with the book? What's going on?
Are you kidding me now? I mean, white whale. I mean, that's Moby Dick, right? I mean, that's what
I know it's Moby Dick, but why would that be erased from the lexicon?
Because who the hell reads Moby Dick anymore? Like, who even knows that Moby Dick exists? Like I mean, when they're going whale hunting, I don't think people realize that whale hunting was actually a thing, and like a really popular thing that was like the basis for like New England's entire financial structure. But yeah, whale hunting existed, and there was a whole book written about it called Moby Dick and the Pursuit of something.
Wait, Pat Riley didn't invent whale hunting?
No, nor did he invent white whales. No. And so, yeah, I mean, to use the term the white whale, like it meant something 20 years ago, and maybe this is just, somebody who a literature major and somebody who kind of studied this or once upon a time, and it's just like, do people still know about the white whale and Moby Dick?
Do we need to clear out again?
I know. I'm not getting
the whole Moby Dick thing.
the whole Melville spiel. No, that's all right.
I haven't read the book, but I did know that it was a Moby Dick thing. I am a little. I didn't know that there was a movie. I'm kidding. I didn't know that there was a movie. I didn't see it. That's black and white, right? That was a black and white film.
Nope. None of them were. None of them were.
It was a black and white book.
Yes, the letters on the page typically were black, and the pages were typically white or yellowed in some cases, depending on the quality of the book.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's one of those phrases that is going to live on past the original meaning of it, where it just ends up being something that
hang up
part
the
of the
phone.
lexicon. Yeah, exactly. Hang up the phone, right? This doesn't count. Like, it doesn't anymore. But yeah.
It just doesn't have the same impact.
Hey kids, you actually used to hang the phone up on something. That's where that comes from. It's not pushing a button.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was no button phones. It was just landlines, baby. Which I find really interesting that
Soup
people.
Cans.
Oh, well, I mean, that's a whole thing. I don't even know that anybody knows what that reference is, but like people now that are like live and die by cell phones that are like,
right.
You're old enough to know what a rotary phone is. Maybe that's I'm probably alienating a huge portion of our younger audience there, but a rotary phone where you have to turn the dial in order to ring and call somebody up, like, and now it's like, oh, I can't live without my cell phone. It's like, okay, where did you take the rotary phone into your bathroom with you? You weren't looking up anything on the internet because there was no internet. So I don't know. It's just that's my 2 cents. I feel like Andy Rooney again, probably another huge dated reference.
What is that?
Andy Rooney?
Running on
60 Minutes.
From?
What really gets my goat, that kind of thing.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.